Now available for the first time in paperback. Stop Simping in the Workplace. Men, learn what you need to know in order to protect your job from workplace predators with Stop Simping in the Workplace. Available in paperback at online booksellers everywhere. As the COVID-19 pandemic starts to end, many employers are waking up to a changing workplace. And that workplace is changing not because of the employers, but it is changing because the employees are starting to push back against many traditional employer policies. Now, many of these employers are now finding that they're having a harder time finding workers to fill low-wage jobs because half the country, after being out of work, is tired of having to deal with abusive work environments, low wages, and terrible working conditions. And those employees who are working in offices are now pushing back by saying that they no longer want to work in an office anymore, and now they want to go out here and work remotely. And many employers, on hearing that employees are talking about wanting to continue working remotely, are getting upset when many of these employees are just looking to just walk away from the job. And when I take a critical examination of those employees who are quitting instead of going back to the office, it just shows me how much time people have had to really think about the state of their lives and the direction their lives were going in. Now, the COVID-19 pandemic was extremely stressful for a lot of Americans who lost their jobs, and many lost family members. And as they started to take that critical examination of their life in the year that they were at home collecting unemployment, many of those people started to really think about the state and direction of their lives, and they realized that there were just some things that they were tired of tolerating about as related to the workplace, and they were just tired of having to deal with that codependent work environment that had been the standard ever since the 9/11 recession. Because in the 9/11 recession, many employers started to gain leverage in the job market after the dot-com bubble popped all across the country and all across the world. And after the dot-com bubble wound up popping all across the country and all across the world, many of these employers gained the leverage in order to have power over their employees and the ability to dictate the terms and conditions of the job. So many employees had to accept whatever standards that the employer gave them as related to the job, and they had to sit there and tolerate all sorts of abuses, like having to work long hours and having to put up with pay scales as related to being low wage. So many employers, employers had the edge as related to their employees, and the employees had to accept this, and they had to accept even harsher conditions as the Great Recession came in 2008 that practically wound up collapsing and imploding America's economy. But with the COVID-19 pandemic, it looks like employees have hit a breaking point, and as they have sat at home, they have thought and reflected about their lives, and as they have thought and reflected about their lives, they have just gotten so fed up with these intolerable working conditions that they decided that they don't want to return to a codependent work environment where they have to deal with abusive managers who verbally abuse them and play passive-aggressive mind games, and they're just tired of having to deal with low wages, and they're tired of having to work long hours and being given unrealistic goals and unrealistic deadlines
And that's why many employees these days are refusing to go back to these fast food jobs. And many who have been working in office jobs are just choosing to quit working because they are just tired of having to deal with all of this abuse after enduring all of the stresses they have encountered as related to the COVID-19 pandemic, because many of these employees, they have already sat through an extremely stressful situation, being out of work for over a year. And many of those employees, after sitting there out of work over a year, worrying about how they're going to pay their bills and feed their family, they're just realizing that they are just tired of all of the abuses they've had to deal with over the years, dealing with these people at these jobs, these toxic managers. And they realize that this whole toxic environment just isn't worth having to deal with that stress. And when I listened to the whole Bloomberg report, what was really interesting to me was how gynocentric it is, because again, here we have another article talking about how corporate America is trying to get the women back into the workforce and how desperate employers are to get the women back into the workforce. But what's really interesting to me is how many in corporate America really don't understand female nature and how they have practically made one of the gravest errors as related to the whole job market. And the reason why the job market is not bouncing back and people aren't going back to their jobs is because, as related to female nature, most women like to nest. And most women, now that they have nested at home, have no real incentive to go back to the job. And they don't want to go back to the job because now they are comfortable at home, the natural place that God created the woman to be, and they would rather be spending their time caring for their children rather than going back to a 9-to-5 job. And that has many of these employers practically pulling out their hair, because now they have to deal with the fact that they no longer have women in the workforce to lower the value of wages. And now they're going to have to actually deal with the men in the workforce. And when you deal with the man is not going to sit there and tolerate these hostile working conditions. He's not going to tolerate a codependent work environment where he is dictated to by abusive bosses. And he's going to push back, and he's going to push back because he understands his value as a man, and he understands his worth as a man. And many employers don't want to deal with men coming back to the workforce, and that's why they're all in a tizzy about these women leaving the workforce, all 2 to 3 million of them. And they are really upset about many women quitting their jobs because they know they can no longer get a pool of cheap labor to counter all of the men who have been out of work ever since the Great Recession. Because if those men go back to the workforce, they're going to have to pay higher wages to those men. And that is the thing that has many of these employers crapping their pants, because they know if that man returns to the workforce, that man is going to, 1, demand higher wages, 2, he's going to demand better working conditions than the woman, and 3, he's going to insist on consistent hours for his work. So the days of people working 12 to 14-hour days are going to be over. And with the man in charge, you're only going to get 8 hours of work, no more, no less, because a man understands the value of his time, and a man is going to set hard boundaries as related to how he is treated on the job. And this is very different than the way women are out here on the job, because when you have a woman on the job, she will agree to anything because she is naturally submissive, and a woman will go along with all sorts of unrealistic things like longer work hours, and she will go out here and tolerate taking lower pay grades because she doesn't really study the pay scale the way a man does before he takes a job. So many of these employers, they are getting really anxious because they are seeing women leaving the workforce, and many women are just so fed up that they are actually quitting instead of going back to the office. They want to go back. They want to go out here and work from home. And the reason why they want to work from home is because they have spent time bonding with their children over the course of the pandemic. They have spent time in the home, nesting in the home. They have grown comfortable in their homes. And many of them are saying, hey, this same work is getting done at home and I'm having time for my family. So why do I want to go back to an office where I am constantly hounded and harassed and attacked and presented with unrealistic goals and an unrealistic picture of life when I can go out here and do this work from home and still be paid the same salary and have a better quality of life? That is why so many women and even some men are walking away from the traditional workplace, because they are realizing that they can get the same work done at home and still be able to have a quality of life for themselves. I mean, as someone who has been forced to work from home for himself for over a decade, I can tell you that there's a bit more balance to your life than going out here and going back and forth to an office. Now, I did that in 2000 and 2008 and 2002, and while it was all right for me, I get a lot of work done here, and some days I'm so busy working on SJS Direct stuff that I practically don't have enough time in a day to get everything done, because in between scheduling time to make the YouTube videos and working on books and promoting books online, I stay very busy. And this is something many of your boomer employees don't think somebody can do at home, but I can tell you that it's easy to stay productive at home. And the thing that the employers think is, oh, if I don't have my eye on them, that person is going to be lazy. But I can tell people from personal experience, you're not lazy if you go out and take a minute to go take a walk to the store, or you take a minute to go outside to take a breather. No, that helps you to become a more productive worker. And sometimes it's easy, you can get your work done even with the kids there, because you're not as stressed as you would, because you can focus on things that need to get done. So a lot of employers, they're insecure and they're sitting there thinking, oh, this worker has to be in front of them all the time. But as somebody who works at home and also works with freelancers like comic book artists, I can tell you that you're going to get the same amount of work done at home that you would at the office, and you're going to get that work done possibly at a higher level of quality if you give these people the space that they need. And many employees, as I see it, do need that space to breathe, because a lot of people have been through with a lot of stress with this COVID-19 pandemic. They have some people have possibly had the disease. Others have been stressed by caring for family members and children. Others have been stressed losing family members. And what they don't want to go back to a workplace where they have to deal with a toxic boss and an abusive environment where they're put under even more stress, because many of these people, they've been through enough, and they're saying enough is enough. And that's one of the reasons why they would rather quit their jobs than give up working from home, because they're just tired of having to deal with stress upon stress upon stress. And this was the thing that many elites and many in the corporate world have never expected to come out of this pushback as related to the workplace. They thought they would bounce back and people would just go back to business as usual. But a lot of people are choosing not to go back to business as usual because they're just tired of the abusive conditions of the 9/11 recession workplace, and the Great Recession workplace, where employers practically bullied, intimidated, threatened, harassed workers for hours on end at the job, and practically were out here driving workers to death in many of these cases. I mean, I read about China and how their workers are getting frustrated over there as well, because they have to work Monday through Saturday, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. And then we get the government talking about how they want people to have a third child. But many people there are getting frustrated there because they're getting tired of working these extra long hours and never having any time to themselves. So many people would rather work from home so they can have that time to themselves. And as I see it, you're still going to get the same amount of work done at home that you would at the office, because again, as a guy who's been working on his own like this for over a decade, I can tell you that work is going to get done. I mean, I managed to publish, 4 books a year? And I remember in 2013, I published 13 books in that year. And it's possible to get the same amount of work done and still have time to go out for a walk, still have time to go out and do errands, still have time to have a life. And what most Americans want is that balance to their lives, because we haven't had that balance, as I see it, in over 30 years. I mean, Americans used to take 2 vacations a year in this country, and most Americans these days can't even get a day off just to go get a haircut, or even go out here and just have a day where they just go out and they just hang out with their friends, because some NPC boss has some unrealistic goals and some unrealistic expectations and wants to meet some ridiculous number, but doesn't really count the human cost as related to the people working around them. And because they don't count the human cost as related to the people working around them, that makes those people frustrated, because those people feel like they're not being respected and they're tired of being disrespected. And this has nothing to do with extended unemployment. This has to do with people just being treated with respect. And people don't see respect coming from codependent, abusive individuals on the job. And that's why many people are just fed up with these jobs. And that's why they would rather quit this job and not have to deal with that toxic work environment. And even if it doesn't mean they don't get unemployment, they would rather leave that workplace, because after seeing so many people die here in this country, over 500,000 people die in this country, they realize they only have one life to live. And just like the people who went through 9/11, they realize that because they've got one life to live, they want to make the best of their lives right now. And that has led to the workplace practically falling apart for many of these CEOs who are used to working people into the ground. And if they don't want to adapt to the changing workplace, many of these employers are going to have a hard time filling these jobs with people, because they're sitting there thinking that they can go back to business as usual. But you can't put people through a great trauma like the COVID-19 pandemic and then expect people to just get up, brush themselves off, and go right back to work like they did before. Only a completely sociopathic individual would think that that would be the way to go. Unfortunately, we've got a lot of deeply disturbed individuals working in corporate America who want to try to drive people back to the office, not understanding these people have been through a great trauma. Losing a job is like losing a family member, and dealing with all of those mental health issues has to be dealt with as related to the workplace before we start really talking about transitioning people back to work. I mean, people have been through not only losing a job, but losing loved ones and dealing with all of the negative news that was presented over the last year. And this is all taking a toll on people, but your employers want to go back to business as usual like it was in March 2020. But here in June 2021, they really need to just take that step back and take a chill pill, because the workers are just tired of working like they did before, and they can't work like they did before after the horrors they've gone through, and taking that minute to reflect on much of the abuses they had to put up with. Many of these people want more from their work, and they want more satisfaction out of their lives. And unless employers want to give people some satisfaction, they're going to have a hard time getting people to work for them. Now, if you want to see me make more videos about the workplace like this, you can donate to my Patreon, my PayPal, or my Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. And if you want to learn more about how to overcome workplace predators in the workplace, you can pick up my book, Stop Simping in the Workplace, on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find Stop Simping in the Workplace on Smashwords, the iBookstore, and Google Play. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.
Now available for the first time in paperback, Why 70% of Black Women Are Single. Learn all the reasons why so many Black women can't find a husband and why 70% of Black women are single. Get your copy of Why 70% of Black Women Are Single on Amazon.com today.